Howdy, everybody.
Hi, this is the part where we kill time.
hmm Yeah, even though we already kind of killed time off stream, which y'all didn't
Yeah,
get to see, but it was riveting or something, right?
it was something. I'm closing all my stuff I got open right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, we're good.
we're up.
I didn't even pour my beer yet.
Oh, well, neither did I, but we usually do that during this part anyway, so it's all good. So speaking of,
I have so many cords. It's like a spaghetti monster over here.
all right, well, speaking of beers, I'm still in like repeat beer mode. So I still got the Mad Tree Rounding Third because it's still baseball season. It's still on sale places, and it's still delicious.
All right.
And red IPA, one of my favorite styles ever. So
Yeah, I haven't had an Imperial Red IPA in a while.
yeah,
Those are
that's good shit.
those are special. All right, so tonight I've got wooden cask Great Scott.
Ooh,
It's rye whiskey barrel aged Scotch ale, which I've had before. But like this was like a few years ago, and they were definitely. I could tell what they were going for, and I was hoping that wasn't it. um, I mean, I was hoping what they had put out wasn't their final step. So we're gonna try this again because it was almost amazing, but it just was like things like the hops or the malts or something just didn't pair. Something wasn't pairing as well as it could have with the rye whiskey flavors.
mm.
So I'm hoping
Yeah,
that they have adjusted it.
Yeah. Well, let's find out.
All their beers, when they're barrel aged, this brewery especially, it really feels like they've figured out a way to like put it in a really wet rye whiskey barrel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's still whiskey in it because it often tastes more alcohol-y than what it says it is.
Very whiskey-y.
Yeah,
There are many E's are in there.
well, that's how we made our bourbon vanilla stout. We made it.
Oh yeah,
There's actual bourbon in it.
yeah. We need to do that and so many other things again. But like it's been, I think the last time we made beer was about 10 years ago now. It was like right before I moved to Columbus.
Yeah, they figured this out. It's definitely better.
Oh, good.
Nice and earthy.
Sweet. All right. Well, it looks like we got some people jumping on. So, what do you say we kick this sucker off?
Kick this mug.
Is that a phrase? I don't know. Let's find out.
Kick it. Hello! Welcome to the humanity where we do the things with the stuff for the people. I am Matt.
And I'm Tommy. And tonight, a bit of a bittersweet episode. Some of you may know.
It's our last episode. No, I'm kidding.
It's our last episode this week, I'm afraid.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. But I'm glad we could add some levity because the news we have to share is not so levitous. Happy. So, some of you may know, last week, it was on Friday, found out about the passing of the great Daniel Dennett, one of the infamous, if you will, the four horsemen of the New Atheism, New Atheist movement or whatever. From what I could tell, maybe the lesser known, like I actually wasn't really aware of him very much until the past few years. I remember as a Christian when the whole like big like New Atheism thing was going on in like the early like around 2007 2010, like that area. I really only was aware of Hawkins and not Hawkins, Dawkins and Hitchens. I'm doing great already, folks. But yeah, for some reason, like Dennett and Harris both like just kind of slipped under. Well, I guess they slipped under my radar. Not, well, I guess slipped under the radar of like the church and whatever Christian groups I was in were keeping an eye on. I guess, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
Dawkins had written that book, um, The God Delusion, that rankled
yeah,
a lot of ires, and
yep.
that's not a saying, but let's
Oh,
make it one.
I was about to say wrinkled a lot of dicks.
Yeah,
No.
rankled a lot of dicks. He's a dick rankler. No, he was so his he had that book that was really in your face, and so
Yeah, the God delusion.
he
Yeah,
became well known, and then Hitchens was he's witty and charismatic in like the most English of ways,
yeah,
and um and then Harris made some good points, but he was lower key, and so
hmm
he was still witty, and like Dennett was witty, but like way more calm and not
hmm
not didn't seem to be real into debates, not his thing. So he
yeah,
wasn't out picking fights with people, at least from the Christian's perspective.
hmm
Um, although he should have, this is what I was thinking earlier. I feel like he is or was the most dangerous because, like, if Santa Claus tells you that there is no God, I mean, aren't you going to be more willing to like hear him out?
uh, that's true. I mean, he did seem like I think of the four of them, he definitely seemed the most, I guess, jovial or jolly, as it
Yeah,
were. Like not that the rest of them didn't, but I think they at least came off like much like harsher or more stern and rigid. But
yeah,
even though
definitely.
like especially like Hitchens like had a pretty wicked sense of humor to him, but you know it was British, so a lot of people didn't notice.
Oh man, yeah, he. No, I was listening to something today where he went off. Somebody asked him a question where basically they hadn't been listening like the whole time. It was as a moderator asking him a question, and
Uh,
he's like, "That is a stupid question."
yeah, but yeah, but it's kind of weird. So like we're saying, Dennett seems to have the more like gentler image, I
Mhm.
guess, more like grandfatherly. I mean, just look at him. Yeah, it's like looks like Santa Claus got a job on Wall Street or something. But which is kind of funny though, but because one of the quotes he's actually most known for is there's no polite way to tell someone that they've dedicated their life to a delusion.
Yeah,
That was kind of really like a lot of his message was it's like this is kind of stuff you can't really be polite about. You just got to be blunt and put it out there. But he still seemed to do it with a pretty friendly manner, and like even in the like the what few debates at least that I saw that he was in, like yeah, I guess compared to the other three when they would be in debates, like they'd be very good at it, but you could tell they were very much like I'm in debate mode, and
yeah.
but with him, it was almost like he's just like I'm just here, just spitting facts. Take
Mhm.
I barely give a shit about what you have to say, like almost that kind of level. Like I'm thinking particularly of this debate he had with Dinesh D'Souza, which was just hilarious. But
Yeah, Hitchens had one with Dinesh, and
mhm.
yeah. I listened to some clips of that from today. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
good times.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so for tonight's episode, we're wanting to just kind of pay homage, I guess, to Dennett because he, in some ways, of the four horsemen, as it were, in a lot of ways, he was the one that I guess I kind of resonated with the most on some things. I mean, obviously, like they were all saying things that were very influential with my thinking, but I think with him, maybe more than the others, he really spoke to some of the like very specific issues that I was having, particularly with more like progressive Christianity. But not that he was specifically going after that, but like the others, like a lot of their like attacks or whatever were mainly aimed at like more fundamentalist strands. But I mean, obviously they recognize that more like moderate or progressive forms of Christianity and other religion existed, but it seemed like a lot of their stronger critiques were at the more fundamentalist end. But Dennett was just hitting just religion like as a whole, and
Yeah.
some of the things that and I have some clips I want to get to tonight, and like with some of those like more, like I said, he wasn't necessarily aiming these at like progressive Christianity or more moderate forms of religion, but the things he would bring up were some of the issues that I had with those particular strands, I guess. So yeah, that was really cool to hear him talk about that, which we will get to later. So yeah, um, yeah. So we just figured um, tonight would just be, like I said, we'll play maybe a few clips of his as kind of that to be our like conversation starters or like kind of topic ideas for the evening, because I think um, he probably the book he wrote that I read slash listened to, it was called Breaking the Spell, where he was basically setting out to just look at like why are people religious, like not just now but like through all of human history, like why has religion been such a strong thing, like is it part of our evolution, is it in our genes, is it just a completely social adaptation, does it have any benefits, any like survival skills, like what makes it propagate so much, and then also from his angle, like, and then what can we like, is should we get rid of it, if so how should we get rid of it, what do we replace it with, like. So yeah, he took, I think, compared to the others, a much more like holistic, like big picture approach to it, which I
Yeah.
thought was really cool.
I think the reason why I didn't get too much into him, into his stuff. I watched a couple talks that he gave, and or not. Some of them were really long, so I didn't
Hmm.
watch
Yeah,
all of them. So it
yeah,
was like a college lecture, basically.
hmm,
Um,
yeah.
he was talking about ideas as viruses
No, hmm,
and how ideas behave like viruses, and some viruses are beneficial,
hmm, hmm.
uh, and like isn't the mitochondria, like isn't that a trapped virus
Yeah, it like has its
within
own
cells?
DNA. Yeah, hmm,
Yeah.
yeah,
So like the energy factory of human cells, I think almost any cell really, like any living cell, there's a mitochondria in there which produces energy for the cell, and it was originally a separate virus.
hmm, yeah,
And somehow our DNA has like mitochondria DNA, like we have like merged with that virus, and like we basically
yeah,
can't live without that virus in our cells.
hmm,
Um,
yeah,
and
because intelligent design.
just that concept, yeah, just that concept of ideas as viruses, I was like, it's a lot. It's like I need a break, and then I took a long break.
Yeah, yeah,
But
he definitely gets into some deep stuff. I think like his main like profession, like he was a professor, but I think his main area was philosophy. But I mean, he could talk biology like just about as well as Dawkins or like any other like actual like
yeah,
professional biologist.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of biology in his philosophy.
Yes, I think it was specifically maybe philosophy of science, but yeah, I can't remember
That
specifically.
sounds about right.
Yeah, or at least that's what he talked about a lot. But and philosophy of religion too, obviously.
So today I was thinking a lot about like well, I was listening to something on Myth Vision. Is an older one of his. He was talking to the rabbi guy,
Hmm.
Rabbi something something.
Was it a Toby Singer?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
I
and
like
he was
him most of the time.
yeah. They were talking about how just all the differences in Christianity compared to if it came from Judaism. It was like originally not much like it at all. Like still isn't.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And so I was listening to that and just kind of I had been thinking about is religion good? Like, what would its use be? And uh, because going cold turkey, like that's a tough sell. when you talk to somebody and you go, you have a delusion. It's like that is going to fly with hardly anyone. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like
Oh yeah.
their guard will be up, and so I think the problem was like when. All right, so I was thinking about is there a point when religion becomes especially toxic? And I think it's when you stop asking questions and you start making assumptions about like, okay, this is true, and you stop asking the question, is it true? Why is it true? You know, because if you settle on an answer, now basically that idea is an idol, to use Christianese terms,
Mm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and that idea can't be threatened, even if it's
Right.
wrong. You just
Right.
can't even find that out because that's just bad news.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I so religion. I was listening to Pete Holmes. He's a stand-up comedian. He also has a great podcast called "You Made It Weird," and so he's like post-Christian, spiritual, but spiritual in like a it's probably all science kind of way. Um, and he was
Mm.
talking about how um, religion as a symbol or as a series of symbols, like stories full of symbols, it's it can be helpful when you're reading it in that way, um, and reflecting on it in that way to find like meaning from that in your own current life, and just like any story or any poem
Mm.
or anything that's been popular, basically.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, I
Uh,
just realized I got the graphic up. Continue.
oh, um,
There we go. Nope.
and as a metaphor, as a series, as like a story symbol, I think it is useful and helpful. But when you start looking at it like this is fact and this is how it all should be, and
Yeah.
like it's okay, genocide's okay as long as God tells you to do it, murder's okay as long as God tells you to do it. And it's like, but
Yeah.
God has objective morals. It's like, really, that sounds like God's subjective morality, but we have to follow it. Like,
Yeah. That's. I think we mentioned before the interview that William Lane Craig had. Well, he was on Within Reason with Alex O'Connor.
yeah, yeah.
He had like talking specifically about his moral theory and how it makes sense of specifically like the Canaanite genocide in the Old Testament. Like, how can God order this, especially when it comes to like murdering like all the innocent people and the children and babies and animals even. And he went on, was like, no, it's actually with my moral theory, it's perfectly fine. Like, yeah, sure. When your moral theory is completely ad hoc, then yeah, it's it's gonna work because that's
But then, like other places, he has said he's internally consistent with this. Um,
mm-hmm.
Weird as hell, but he seems to think like, all right, so if God says kill children, it's okay to kill children. Uh, no, but that's his reasoning. Now, apparently, if you enjoy doing that, if you enjoy killing the children, like that's wrong. Like you shouldn't enjoy it. Like it makes sense to not want to, uh, because that's how humanity is wired most of the time. Because God usually doesn't let people do that or want people to do that. So then it's really uncomfortable and like weird when He does tell you to do it. Uh,
Mm.
but He uses that example of like torturing children for fun. Like it seems for fun seems to be
Yeah,
the problem.
they always add that on the end. Like every apologist who mentions that, like they always add for fun. Like,
Well, because you
why?
can't, they can't just say torturing children, period, or like killing children or genocide, period. They have to say like genocide for fun or like.
Yeah, like because it has to be for no reason. Like, because there can be a good reason, like, but just not for fun. It's like, but yeah, that's man. Seems like I say this every episode, but this is something else I want to do a full episode on later.
You
Just the
should
whole
write these
concept.
down.
Yeah,
No,
just the
so
whole
okay,
concept of
so back to what I
morality.
was saying
Like,
about
we, yeah,
religion as a story or as like a cultural story framework.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something unifying and helpful about that. But then as soon as it's like, no, this is the way it is, and this is a fact, and this is right, everything else is wrong. Um, I, that's when it gets toxic and unhelpful. And I don't know if it was. I'd like to think that originally religions were story based, and everybody knew they were stories and not necessarily real. Um,
Yeah, I
and
think from what I understand, it was probably like some kind of weird mix of like they would make up stories, but it's like they knew they were stories, but they also knew that, well, this is the only explanation we have, so it also in a way like might as well be real, even though we kind of know it's
yeah,
not. But
and
yeah.
because it's a product of that culture, and
Hmm.
it's like a unifying story, then it kind of feels like, well, then this has to be real because it feels so true. And the reason why it
Hmm.
feels true is because it's like your subculture zeitgeist, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that religious ideas in that way can even be um, helpful for like agnostics and agnostic atheists because um, it keeps your mind open to possibilities and willing to say I don't know for sure,
Hmm.
because as soon as you say I know for sure, unless it's something that's been proven, I'm talking about like unfalsifiable stuff,
Right.
or up until now unfalsifiable. Uh, Going from therefore I don't know to I know for sure, I think
Mm.
that's a problem. And when you lose that little bit of like intellectual humility or spiritual humility, then you can sign on to all kinds of stuff. And um, it's very easy to use logical fallacies and for a bias to get in there if you
Mm.
start to get
Hmm.
firm about stuff
Oh yeah.
that you can't be firm on.
Yeah, because I think it's one of the. Um, well, I mean, it's a issue with cognitive dissonance. Like
Yeah.
you're trying so hard to believe this one thing is true, so like your brain is kind of building all these like defense mechanisms.
Yep.
So like as soon as anything like threatening to the idea comes across, like you'll just like throw whatever you got at it, at least enough to make you feel safe from the threat, whether or not it actually
You're
does
like,
make you safe from it or not.
but you know, like I think that's where the use of logical fallacies, like why people, especially people of faith, think that these are helpful reasons or good reasons. They throw in a logical fallacy, and when really all they've done is run around in a circle and told themselves they've run away. You
I
know
like
what I
that
mean?
because it's all about what you tell yourself. Yep.
And they're like, "Ha! I confused me. I must be saying deep things." Or like,
All the DPDs. Yes.
but I don't blame me. You know, from that time period or people,
Yeah.
because it like church services and small group stuff, and like it's full of logical fallacy things, and so you're used to that being sold as deep spiritual teaching or
Mm.
deep spiritual insight. um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, back to the concept of religion as stories. You know, 'cause this is something that we've mentioned a lot. Like stories are helpful, but as long as you realize they're stories, and as long as you're willing to be flexible with those stories, like flexible when it comes to like new actual like information
Hmm.
and things that should change them. Um, because in a way, because that's basically what science does, or at least what it tries to do, or ideally, like what it should do is like, okay, well, here's our current theories, and then we'll just keep going with this until something comes along to upend them or disprove any of it, and then we'll adjust, and then okay, go with that, and then keep moving forward.
And they try to disprove it over and over again.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? They're like, okay, we haven't disproven it. Let's take this theory, apply it to things it should work with, and then see if it does work with that.
Yeah.
And uh, like I think this might be very much a Western culture thing. Um, you read a story, and religion is where it gets a little weird compared to other stories, because normally when you read a story, if we call it meaning, you get a lot of meaning out of a story, a poem, or a movie or something. But then when
Hmm.
it's a religious story, we say like it feels true or something, and things can feel true and it can be true, not in a factual way. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Or like, oh, this story really captures like kind of like what it means to be a human in this kind of circumstance, and um,
Hmm.
so there is truth in it, but it's not
Yeah.
factual.
Yeah.
And
Or
conflating the two is a big problem.
yeah, or I think the way Peter Enns would put it is like it's true, it's just not real. Meaning like the story, like okay, the story didn't actually happen, so it's not real in that sense, but it's true as in like there is a truth in it that it's trying to convey. Yeah.
And it's real in
And
a
but
way where like it's real for the person reading it, like they're having
yeah.
that
Yeah, but
experience with
he
it.
was talking like with the Bible specifically, saying like it's
Yeah,
not real as in like okay, the Genesis creation story isn't real as in it didn't actually happen, but there are truths in it that you can like that they were actually trying to convey. But yeah, but I think also like um it's helpful like to approach it as in you can find, especially when it comes to religious stories, like you can maybe find truths in them, but thinking that whatever you find in it is the ultimate truth. It's
yeah.
like I mean it might be, but you got to be open to maybe it's not. So
I don't think
yeah.
there is an ultimate truth. I kind of feel like I kind of feel like in a way it's all circular. Like everything is a metaphor for something else. Um, Kind of like an Ouroboros kind of thing, where if we could zoom in far enough um, on like an atomic level, if we could zoom in like farther than even possible, what if we just saw like a smaller version of our universe or something? You know what I mean? Like you zoom in far enough and you've zoomed out, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so yeah, you've come full circle. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's just everything relates to everything else. So um, everything is impacted by something else, and that thing impacts another thing. Like it's everything is kind of like the whole cause and effect thing. There isn't an original cause. Um, maybe effects cause causes in the same way that causes cause effects.
Hmm. I don't know. Sounds neat though.
Yeah,
All right. Well, since something we mentioned in the conversation like several points ago kind of reminded me of a thing, so I'm going to go ahead and play another clip from our good buddy Dan here.
double D.
Because this like so speaking of him bringing up issues that I was really having with the more like progressive forms of Christianity, like something I've said multiple times is like as I was kind of on my way out and kind of deconstructing my way towards atheism, basically, is because I would keep having questions. Like someone would assert something, even like to this day, I'll see people like make assertions about, well, this is what I think Jesus is really like. And it's like, well, how do you know? And the answer, like, basically always just boils down to, well, it's just basically what I choose to believe. It's like, okay, well, that's cool, but I'd rather like actually know stuff. So that's when you get, oh, well, God's like, it's beyond science, it's beyond our understanding. It's like, yeah, but why? Like, shouldn't we be able to understand it? But all
If
right,
it's
so
beyond our understanding, like why even bother? Like why bother with the religion or the particular
mhm,
phrasing? And seems like an
right,
attempt to understand something we can't understand.
yeah. So again, going back to like, okay, admit that it's a story, and say, okay, we're still trying to figure the story out. But when it comes to something that is going to be like to the high stakes of this is what I'm actually basing my life on, it's like I want to have something a little more firm than that. I mean, if story is the best we got, that's the best we got. But
Yeah.
yeah, just so here's just a clip of Dennett talking about the idea of like science being beyond religion and how it's really kind of designed that way. So, and how that can be frustrating. So, here we go.
God has
Okay.
been designed to be beyond the verification process of science. This is one of the classic adaptations of religions is to create this gulf so that science can't get anywhere near God. That's true, but science can understand that very fact.
You say that
Science can understand how religions evolved and why. By the way, that idea is completely absent in folk religions, which are the ancestors. The idea of God being, as it were, beyond science. They don't make a distinction between science and religion. In folk religions, it's all the same. It's all one. This is just what everybody knows. And they have no concept of faith. They don't need a concept of faith. It's only once you start getting this separation between science and other things that people think they know when maybe they don't, that's when the idea of faith looms and becomes a very
Interesting.
Why are you tiny? There you go.
I don't know. No, that's really interesting. Almost like, so I really think that we've like 90% of what our brain is doing is not something that we're consciously aware of, even when we're conscious, like awake.
Mm.
So some of the apologetics, gymnastics and stuff that has happened almost since the very beginning of Christianity. God being designed as separate from like being outside of science or outside of time and space, that kind of talk. I feel like that's a result of needing to defend God from science, and I don't think I don't think it was conscious in most people's thinking. I feel like that like the background part of their brain figured out, okay, here's how we protect this thought or this idea, and then it consciously comes out as some kind of objection or apologetic, and because it does seem designed, but I don't know of any apologist who's like, I've figured out a way to keep God separate from science, or that's really interesting. The whole like faith as a concept, as an important thing, happened the more we learned about science, and then there was like this need to protect the pre-science assessment of the world.
Yeah, because like I said, that was one of my frustrations. Like the more I kept like trying to look into it, because I came from like growing up in like the form of Christianity, it's like, oh, science does prove Christianity, like creation of science, intelligent design, that whole thing, like all this archaeology proving the Bible. And
well, right, if you only tell one side of the story and you don't list any of the objections to that side, then sure, it sounds wonderful and true, and
it does,
sciencey.
So and because this is something else he talks about. I was in like another clip. I was trying to find this other clip because this is part of one of his talks, like where he first kind of talked about this concept. I guess maybe the first time I saw this part of his talk, maybe I must have seen it as like a much bigger deal than he was actually making it. Because like I kept trying to go find this video again, and like one, it was just like hard to find. But then when I did find like the talk it was in, it was just like this little blurb almost. It was like, oh, that wasn't really as impactful. But I guess just the first time I saw it, like
Yeah.
thinking, is when he was talking about how the notions of God that people have had, like the images of him that we've had over time, have changed, kind of tracking with the more we've learned about reality. Because at first, like something else we've talked about is like the gods were like very real, like almost physical, like beings, with bodies and everything. Like they gave birth, they died, they ate, they slept,
They fought.
Took shits, all that.
They committed adultery with each other and
and with humans and stuff, and yeah. So, but then the more we started actually learning about reality, because it'd be like, okay, like Zeus or whoever is like the one throwing thunderbolts, but then we learned, oh, this is how lightning actually works. Like, oh, well. so he knows, like he kind of points out how over time, like God or the gods in general just become like much more nebulous. Like basically they go from beings to the ground of all beings. Like it's just much more ethereal. Like, and then of course, well, it's beyond science. You can't really expect to find him or see him anywhere, which is like really weird for a god who apparently wants to have a relationship with everybody. He's like, and he like can't be seen anywhere or detected.
yeah, that's really goofy. Because
Yeah.
how do you? All right, sure. If you got natural world, which is science, and you have supernatural stuff, which is somehow like outside the natural world. But as soon as the supernatural interacts with the natural world, there's going to be natural effects and studyable things. So even if there is a supernatural thing, there would be these natural things that happen that don't seem to have, like you can't chase the cause back all the way. Like you get to a point where you're like, we don't know what caused this cause, and that would be the evidence of something supernatural coming in, like a new change cause and effect.
Yeah, but
But
still, like
the impact would still be studyable, and so like a miracle would still have science for it.
yeah, but and I've heard that explanation. Like, yeah, it makes sense. But I guess for me, like, I take it like even a step further. It's like I would even expect whatever supernatural agent is behind it to be apparent and at least somehow like measurable and interactable.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I could say like one example I like to use, because Christians like that's
Well,
basically
if that deity is at all consistent, then it would be testable and predictable.
yeah, or just like if God was actually like he was in the Bible and he actually like showed up and like actually talked to people and walked with people and
But didn't do that in the New Testament anywhere. He was barely a supporting character.
yeah, that's something I didn't realize until recently. I mean, other than Jesus, but like God is like no longer a character in the New
Other than
Testament.
like Jesus talking to
Yeah,
him in a prayer in the garden, like
yeah, or at his baptism when like the voice from heaven comes, or whatever. But yeah, there's no
okay, yeah,
like
the voice.
prophecies. There's no like God communicating, like other than like, okay, there's a few visions like Paul's vision on the road to Damascus, but yeah, for the most part, it's like just a bunch of dudes talking, including Jesus, depending on your view of his divinity or lack thereof. But yeah. Yeah, whereas the Old Testament, it's always like, and then God told so and so to do this, and then God did this, and then God just murdered the fuck out of these people and whatever.
Murdered the fuck straight out of him.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the only, apparently with the flood, that's the only way he could figure out to get rid of the fucking everyone and just murderize them all with water.
So, Owen, my son, he he calls it madurdered because he's like, I was doing fine in the game, and then all of a sudden I got madurdered. Oh, madurder.
Oh, rated madurder. Yeah. I like that. Oh man,
Yeah,
I was going somewhere. Where was I going?
I madurdered your train of thought.
I mean, I was starting to beat it to death myself. Actually, just blunt force trauma.
Let me give you something new to beat. So
Thanks.
I So I was while we were talking, I was kind of like reflecting in the back of my head. I don't think I have a problem. I don't think somebody having faith bothers me. Maybe not even the concept of like faith without evidence, like it's a belief without evidence. Like that's less of a problem and less dangerous for society or a person themselves uh, than someone having faith despite the evidence. That is way more unhealthy. Um, because like there is always going to be something, there's always going to be like, even if it's just the universe or existence itself, and we have, to us, that feels like a connection or a relationship or like something tangible,
Mhm.
that will always, I think, be beyond the experience of it, will be beyond explanation, and then like the arts will fill that gap, and that
Mm.
just makes sense. But believing something despite the evidence, like solid evidence to the
Yeah.
contrary, that's harmful.
Hmm. Yeah. That, yeah, that was. I feel like our past two episodes where we talked about, last week where we talked about just the idea of faith, and then like the week before that we were talking about the needing to like credit God for like all the good things, but like not blame him for any of the bad things. I feel like just about any topic we discuss, like involving Christianity specifically, like I think it was probably overlap with those. So go back and watch our last two episodes, everybody. They're very informative for conversations going forward and prior to, in fact, and tell your friends. Um, but yeah, I think so. We were talking about being able to measure, at least being able to measure like miracles or miraculous or like divine intervention or whatever in some form. And then I was talking about how I would go a step farther and say I would also expect some evidence of the divine agent itself behind it, because otherwise you just have an unexplained phenomenon. And
Yeah.
that's so the example I like to go back to, because like Christians will like they'll just take anything unexplainable and they say, well, God would explain this, and like for them that's good enough. I'm like, no, it's not good enough to say, well, this thing would explain the phenomenon, and you have to actually show that that thing you're trying to use to explain it is actually a thing.
Well, and you also got to prove that like that thing does that thing. Like, well, God
Right.
exists, that would explain it. Unless he doesn't do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if God exists, but like God God doesn't
Oh yeah.
do cell division or something? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
maybe there's a
or like in my case, God's like, no, I didn't cure your cancer. That was the immunotherapy. What are you talking about?
yeah, or just
Uh,
oh yeah, or like
yeah,
God puts things into action, and like and God's like, I didn't do that. That just happened because I did the one thing. Like,
yeah.
you know?
That's where I kind of like the way I like to put it is if you took like the sort of like Christian, like what do you call it, like apologetic or faith approach, but if you put it in terms of the scientific method, it's almost like they just come up with a hypothesis, claim that it's untestable, and then declare it proven true because you didn't disprove it. you know.
Yeah,
So so the example I like to use is because I feel like the Santa Claus analogy is a little bit overused, kind of infantilizes it a little bit. So I'll go with the
yeah, it's
Easter
not
Bunny.
quite fair. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'll go with the Easter
funny
Bunny.
sometimes, but not really fair.
Yeah. So the Easter Bunny. So say if Easter morning, if just a basket full of like colorful eggs and candy and stuff just shows up on my front porch. Like no note, I didn't see anyone come up and drop it off. I didn't hear anything. That no, like no one told me they were dropping off a basket or like nothing. Like so, if someone like again, I said trying not to infantilize it, but say if usually a kid, if someone still believes in the Easter Bunny, say, well, clearly that's the Easter Bunny because that's what the Easter Bunny does according to all the stories and the things my parents told me and all that. I'm like, okay, yes, if the Easter Bunny were real, that would explain it.
hmm
But you would first have to demonstrate that the Easter Bunny actually is real before you can even
Yeah,
approach saying that that's why this happened. Like, 'cause so many more. Like, it could just be some person that like snuck up without me noticing. Like, that's completely plausible. That happens all the time.
And that's not faith either. Like if you're like if you have proof or evidence for your faith, then it's not faith. Like now
Right.
you're conflating like some kind of like pseudo science thing or
Mhm.
approach with maintaining your faith. And I don't know. That's not. I don't think that's fair to anybody to do that to themselves. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like how like Dennett was saying in that clip we showed earlier about how like the whole idea of faith, like that was not a part of what he called like folk religions, and he kind of
that was a really interesting point.
yeah, in like in other talks and stuff of his, like, so I recommend like just so even if it's just like in honor of his passing, in his memory or whatever, or if you just haven't really heard of him much and want to learn more, just go on YouTube and just type Dan Dennett. Like you'll get tons of stuff. Like so that's specifically his talks around his book Breaking the Spell. Those were really good. Um, but he talks about like folk religions, meaning like literally like where these religions like initially started, before they became like these big established, especially, kind of like state religions, like how like Judaism and Christianity and Islam and all these others came. But when like in their very origins, he talks about how, like faith apparently wasn't really a thing. It was just like, well, this again, going back to all we have is stories to explain reality because we don't have like at least what we know is science yet. So
Mm-hmm.
they're just like, so like the Aztecs, like, oh, the sun's disappearing. Let's start ripping people's hearts out to bring it back. Like, well, it clearly worked. I mean, that's not faith. It's like we did the thing, the sun came back. That's apparently just how it works.
Yeah, it's kind of a primitive science thing.
Yeah.
And
So
that reminds me. Speaking of sacrificing and ripping out hearts, not really. The prayer
I'd love
tent
to
thing. No,
go
no,
on.
no. I like how that didn't match really so much. Um,
I love it. Or did it? Let's find out.
so there is kind of like a science to that. The reason why the method that we did in that group was a method is because it was something that was trial and error over time, and like this seemed to work the best for getting people to a. Honestly, I would call it like shotgunning them through with some kind of ego death like scenario. Uh, and that's why like maybe that's where the heart ripping out thing came in and why it was funny and sort of apt is because there was something to the discussion that we had with people that like helped people process something in rapid ways, right? And so there was kind of like a loose scientific approach where people tried it and like this works really well and seems to work like frequently, and so they're like, oh, this is how we should do prayer when we're trying to like do healing and deliverance stuff. um
Mm-hmm.
uh just kind of like as a side note, like seeing somebody go through basically like processing trauma in kind of an involuntary way out loud and through physical things and stuff that looks like um healing and deliverance, uh
Mm.
that's not like a fruit of the spirit kind of thing. Like that was kind of what we kind of saw as evidence that like whatever it was working or it was doing crazy things or something. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe that meant that like that was a really rough unrefined approach that was like not gentle with people.
Mm.
um
Yeah.
and
Huh.
just because we found a way to kind of like hack the background system of the brain and to get it to process something um that was stuck or whatever, or that our like conscious brain was like trying to like get in the way of it processing, um like that could very well be the case that like we just this particular way of doing it hacked the system. But that doesn't mean that it hacked the system when you have a particular worldview to begin with, or are friendly to that worldview. then when people use that particular language to address it in this kind of systematic way, um, it kind of debugs the system.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just kind of reinforces what's already kind of that you're already kind of have a disposition towards or
Yeah.
leaning towards or
And then
bias.
making assumptions like about why it worked or how it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that it did something. It looked helpful, seems helpful. They seem a little better now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then jumping to conclusions of like what happened, how it happened, why it happened. Uh,
Yeah.
if there is a God, I don't understand why people wouldn't want to know the factual God, like the God that really
Yeah.
is. And so when our best methods for testing reality, scientific methods, the scientific method, uh, why the pushback? It seems like there's a fear of maybe finding out there's nothing there, you know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or the fear of being open to there being nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, yeah, maybe that's something where, ooh, maybe this is a thing where maybe even more than Christians being afraid of finding out there's nothing there, like, are they also, or maybe even more afraid that they'll be okay with that?
Ooh, that's a big one too. Or I don't know, because like if you find out there's nothing there, like there is no God, then it leads to questions like, are we really here? And like
Yeah. Yeah.
you end up deconstructing everything. But I think that when you're able to do that,
It
it's
sounds like that sucks.
yeah. Like when, and I'm not saying I have done all of that, but I'm to the point where I just want to know what's true. Um,
Yeah.
as best as anyone can understand it, what's real, what's true.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. And the
and
way you
like
put it at one point during our deconstruction, I don't know if you came up with this, but feel free to take credit for it.
that.
But you said the most, or at least one of the most important questions you can ask yourself is like, if your beliefs are wrong, would you want to know?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, this is just part of my, part of my personality, the way my brain works. In some cases, you could consider it a flaw, but like, I just hate being wrong. So I think, and so in a way, that was definitely part of a driver of my deconstruction and then eventual deconversion. This is like all the things that I used to think appear to be wrong. I don't want to think the things that are wrong no more. So,
Yeah. You know, I was I was doing a little substance induced meditation the other evening, and
times.
um, like the serpent in Genesis. Um, hold on, I got multiple shit going off.
Is the serpent calling you right now? uh,
Stupid reminder, I forget to turn off.
yeah. She'd set a reminder to remind you to turn off the reminders.
Yeah, I might need to. All right, so the serpent in Genesis. So in ancient Semitic cultures, the serpent was a symbol of wisdom or lies. It was a symbol of harm or health. Um, it
Hmm.
was a symbol of wisdom, a symbol of deceit, and that was like consistent. It wasn't like some places meant this, some places meant that. It meant like in ancient Hebrew culture, it was both, like depending on the particular story or other cultures in that area. So it seems like to me that in Genesis, the serpent is sharing wisdom. He's saying something that could either be helpful or harmful, depending what you do with it. Uh, so he said, "Did God really say you couldn't, eat from anything?" Um, that's a good question to always ask ourselves. Like, if you're a believer or a non-believer, did God really say that, or is there really no God? Like, you know what I mean? Always
Yeah,
ask that question.
which
And then what
Yeah.
Eve answered and said, yeah, God said, don't eat it, don't even touch it. She invented that second part. God didn't say don't touch it. And so now you have kind of like a little metaphor for religion. Somebody had some insight, and now you put a framework around it, you put a rule with it.
Uh-huh.
And
then you make that you build that fence bigger, or
yeah, and what's the knowledge of good and evil? It means like believing you know what's good and what's evil, right? And so what is Christianity morphed into? A belief, like a whole system based around we know what's good and what's evil, and that's the wrong tree, bitches.
yeah. I mean, never mind the fact that like before they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So then, therefore, before they had knowledge of good and evil, how were Adam and Eve? How were they supposed to know it was wrong to eat the fruit in the first place?
So it's like the serpent's
That's the
question.
whole thing.
Like the serpent's question wasn't evil, depending on how you answer it. That
No, but not if you ask the sort of like anti-deconstruction crowd. Because that's the thing that I heard thrown out all the time. Like the original deconstruction was all based on the question, did God really say? And they're like, that's what all the people who are deconstructing, that's what they're doing. They're just asking, just like the devil did, and saying, did God really say this? And they're just not taking the Bible at its word, and
how's a question evil
blindly. And
isn't that the same question that apologetics douchebags, apologetics bros are answering? They're saying they're answering the question, did God really say that? Like they're assuming there's a question and they're answering it. And
I mean, they might view it as, well, all you like evil non-believers are asking the question, so we're answering your question because you're a bunch of dumb heathen going to hell people. I don't know.
And the serpent was right. You will not surely die. They didn't.
Yeah.
God misled or changed his mind. Either way, not a good look for Christians.
Yeah, and also, like, everyone says, well, they had to be kicked out of the garden because they sinned, and now that they like tainted it, and like God's holy presence can't be around sin. But if you actually look at what God was saying when this, like, about why he kicked them out when he was having that discussion with himself or like the other gods or whoever, when he
it's unclear.
like he said, he didn't say, well, we have to kick them out now because of like their dirty sin and we can't be around that. And he says, no, we have to remove them because now they're going to be like us.
Well, there was I think, right, but then I think there was the concern also that they ate from the tree of life, then they would live forever. Mm-hmm. In their wrong answer to the question.
Yeah, which also raises the question, well, what would have happened? I want to know what would happen if they didn't eat from either tree. If they didn't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which apparently brought death, but then also didn't eat from the tree of eternal life, which they apparently needed to eat to not die. But if there was no death because they wouldn't have eaten from the other tree, then...
Well, the needing to eat from the tree of life to not die, that's kind of like an added thing. It's unclear. Like, that's kind of like writing... That's a little bit of fan fiction, I think, done by theologians.
I mean, it's... Yeah, this is a whole other tangent. So, but speaking of tangents, some of the things we like had been discussing could, if you're wanting to go here, lead into another clip, which included that screenshot that I sent you earlier today, which potentially some heavy territories. I don't know if you wanted to kind of go there yet, or...
Well, I kind of want to sit on the serpent thing just for like another minute. Because
that's why I wanted to make sure before moving on. So, yeah.
Like, that's a valid question. Like, did God really say that? Like,
that, I mean, that's... Wouldn't you want to know?
So
otherwise, you're just going to believe any voice that claims God.
Like, isn't that what we... Isn't that like the whole testing the spirit thing, or testing the spirits, or testing God, evaluating, chewing the cud, all kinds of...
Which really... What I find entertaining, like everyone says, like test the spirits, but like in that verse it said test the spirits. The only way it says to test them is to see if they confess that basically Jesus is Lord and God raised him from the dead. As long as they say that, then they're of God. I'm like, okay.
But then we're relying on our interpretation of what we think the spirits are saying. So it isn't like, how is that any different than trying to think through it on your own?
Yeah, but the way most like modern Christians, or not just modern, but probably for centuries or whatever, but they'll say, because like, what's the phrase we always heard? Like, if you think you hear from the Spirit, what are you supposed to test it against?
The Bible,
Right. Now, as you're
written
reading
by
the Bible,
people.
right. Now, but as you're reading the Bible, how, and there's like so many different ways to interpret it. How are you supposed to know if you're interpreting it correctly? You ask
The Bible or the Spirit.
the Spirit.
Yeah,
So, and then how are you supposed to know if you're hearing from the Spirit
the
correctly?
Bible.
And then how are you supposed to know you're reading the Bible correctly to know you're hearing from the Spirit correctly?
Well, the Spirit and other people. Yeah.
But then how are those other people supposed to know? That it's
I
this whole
I don't know. That's something you're
yeah.
not supposed to ask. Like if somebody has more spiritual authority than you or was more mature than you in the
I
Lord.
I clearly have a Jezebel spirit. So
No, I think it's I think the question like did God really say that, or like another analogous way to say it would be uh is that really how it is? Like
mm,
asking yourself that question, I think that's like the only question to ask because that's what keeps you grounded in reality. That's what helps you avoid being misled.
it's so good. I need another beer. So keep talking.
And if God really did say that, then that's a keeper. you know, like
Right?
why would we want to follow anything that is that's wrong? I don't understand that when somebody's like, I just am asking, I just want to know if this is really true, and the Christians are like, well, that's dangerous.
Yeah, because that's
Like
the thing
I'm like,
that
why don't you want to know what's true?
yeah, because that's the thing that gets me. Like when we talk about the whole like sort of like dichotomy of sometimes conflict between like faith and reality. So what I was told is that God is the author of truth, and truth is reality. So you shouldn't be afraid of someone going out to simply explore reality and to see what's out there, in reality. Because if God is real, then they are going to find God in reality. But so much of the church, like they are so afraid of people doing that, like just going out on their own
yeah,
to just examine reality and see what's there,
I
because
I think that's it.
apparently they don't trust God with people very much.
Well, I also think it's a tacit admission that it really is how we see things that decides what is God and what isn't. And you know what I mean? Because if
Mhm.
somebody can go out there and make draw the wrong conclusions, then there's a whole lot left up to people's conclusions. And maybe it's all people's conclusions. I think that's
I know, right?
and if they have anything to do with the person that draws different conclusions, now they feel guilty or they're like, I'll be too close to somebody questioning and I'll feel it will feel more normal to question things and so much of fundamentalism is defense mechanism
Oh yeah. Hmm.
and
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I guess defense of fundamentalism, and this is something that
bust you.
I want to say this was something that Hitchens spoke about. Is he's like, or whoever it was, but basically the idea of it's like it's the fundamentalists that are being like the most honest about it, because there's saying like, okay, we're
Really?
just taking our holy scripture and we're just taking it at its word. Like if we're going to base our religion on this book or set of books, then this is what
Okay,
we're going to go with. So then
I can see that
when
angle. Yeah.
when it came to like the Enlightenment, so when like we started developing like science and scientific method and actually being able to discover things about the world in verifiable, repeatable, testable ways. I mean, that's a lot of people trace the beginnings of like modern fundamentalism back to that, because that's when they're like, oh well, all these like science people, like they're having their books and their like measurements and like, so that's when
Oh yeah.
the Bible became like much more important to things like the Reformation movement. So it's basically that's when Christians started getting the idea of what's turning into now the whole thing. Oh, science does prove the Bible and God and all this stuff. And like, so basically, it was their attempt to sort of combat or respond to, like, you know, the scientific revolution, to say, well, our beliefs are like provable and measurable and very evident as well. See, we got our book; it's got all the true things, and we're going to prove it to you how it's all true. And so, I mean, that's so in a
So
way, like, I think it's respectable to say, if you come at it honestly, I think that's really what, at that point, I think that was kind of what you had to do, is like, okay, well, if this is the way society's going, and is, you know, to where we're putting things to like actual like rigorous testing and investigation, well, let's do that with our book, with our faith, our religion, and see how it comes out. Now, unfortunately, they went into it with, apparently, with the presupposition that it was true. So it was more like, let's take our book and find all the ways it's true, instead of honestly investigating to see if it actually is. So in a way, like I said, I can at least respect that aspect of like the whole like fundamentalist movement, is like, you know, they're trying to be like, you know, fundamentalist about it, basically, you know, intellectually, they're trying to be intellectual about it and evidence based, which, but so unfortunately, it just doesn't really work unless you really believe it has to.
so in the Renaissance one, which was like kind of during the Enlightenment period, right?
I think
It's either beginning of it or it's not, I don't know. But it was
taking a history class in decades.
yeah, it was a product of the Enlightenment. Or they happened concurrently. I don't remember.
Well, they're related. Oh, yeah. It was enlightening.
But they were doing, so these artists were doing a bunch of, you know, church paintings and sculptures and stuff and icons. And I think it's really interesting that the like the artists were like in full on deconstruction mode, and but they were getting these contracts to do, or commissions to do these pieces in cathedrals and stuff. And like this symbol, I think it's this symbol that you see a lot in like Jesus is doing this. It's like that's a Gnostic hand symbol. That was like a secret Gnostic hand symbol. It was combined with as above, so below.
Yeah,
Like that. And there's like, oh,
like
that's
zeal
it's a blessing symbol.
Yeah, like that Zeal and Ardor song you sent me.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is so that I haven't gotten to the bottom of that song yet. It seems like a combination of maybe a German prayer and like slaves like worshiping the God that makes them free, but the God
yeah. So the name of the song was Götterdämmerung.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So do you know what that actually is?
God damn something.
No. So Götterdämmerung is basically like the end of the world. Like basically, it's also called like Twilight of the Gods, or like Death of the Gods. So it's yeah. In I think I might have actually been in Wagner's Ring Cycle, like operas about like Norse mythology. I don't remember if one of them was actually called Götterdämmerung, but that's basically the apocalypse of that mythology, essentially. So it's like all the gods get killed and everything gets swallowed up by a wolf, and it's all just
And there's a Latin series
of words. It all starts because of a fucking holly branch. I'll tell you later if you don't know that.
Well,
story.
They're really uncomfortable to like walk into a holly bush, so I don't know. Maybe they had a bunch of holly bushes and they're like, that shit's evil.
Do you know the story of Balder and like how he got killed by a holly branch?
No.
Okay, real quick, because I think it's kind of funny. So Balder was like one of the gods. He was like the one that like everyone loved. Like he was great. I don't remember exactly what he was the god of, but everyone just loved him. So his mother and like the other gods, they all decided to just make a deal with like all of nature that nothing would kill him. So they were making deals with like the storms and the winds and trees and spears and rocks and like everything. But apparently, except they did not make a deal. There was this like young holly branch that like his mother's like, oh, I didn't make the deal with that branch. I figured it's tiny, it's fine. So Loki, people know Loki,
The
like
trickster god. Yeah.
yeah, he found out about this. So apparently, because of this, that's basically what the gods did for parties. Is like they would all get together and all just like throw shit at Balder because like none of it would kill him. So they'd be like throwing axes and spears and heavy rocks and like swords and all kinds of shit at him and like and he'd be like, nothing's hurting me. And that's what they did for fun. So then Loki found this holly branch, and then he found this other god who was blind. So he wouldn't know. And he's like, hey, why aren't you throwing shit at Balder? He's like, oh, I'm blind. They won't let me. And I don't even know where he is. Well, here, what if I give you something and I'll point you towards him? So he gives the guy the holly branch and he throws it at Balder and it kills him because. And then that's what starts the whole Ragnarok, Armageddon, Götterdämmerung, all that. So fun little mythology lesson for y'all.
When I was processing that as like a story that has meaning, I was thinking that's like like parents spend a lot of time trying to protect their kids from all the big stuff and don't spend time on the little things. And it's not knowing the little things that, that can hurt them. And like a little thing of like, this is especially a big deal in religious families. Not teaching your kids how to be themselves and instead teaching them how to act. Like not teaching them how to be and instead teaching them how to act.
Yeah.
And if you don't know who you are, and it's just that can be catastrophic. Like the littlest thing can be like somebody comes in and tries to tell like your kid who they are, or praises them for like just being them, and that person may have they might just be a horrible person, and now like your kid like signs on to this person's opinion of them because they wanted them to be them.
Yeah, that's good, man. In our like former Christian days, like an observation like that would have been met with like, oh, that's total Holy Spirit thing, man. You're being prophetic. Yeah, because that was a legit cool insight to pull out. Now, whether or not the author of that story intended it to be that way,
no, I don't think it matters.
Yeah,
I don't think it matters. You know what I mean? Like it depends.
You were able to pull that out of it. Yeah.
Is it useful? Like the thing that Richard Rohr said it, but I think he got it from theologians from other religions. That like, is it good? Is it true? Is it beautiful? And that's what we roll with.
Yeah.
And then like, what is good? What is true? What is beautiful? Those are all great questions, and we should keep asking that. And then whatever we decide is good, true, and beautiful, keep moving with that.
Yeah. And what I like to tell people, going back to a couple weeks ago from our episode then, talking about like giving credit, feeling like we have to give credit to God for everything, or we have to like if you're getting some from the Bible, you have to credit the Bible with it, and like, oh, this is clearly what the author meant. So like in this instance, like I would say is like no, I would say, especially since it's not clear at all that the author of that story meant that. So it's like it's not like you have to like credit the text with that lesson. It's like no, all credit to you for that, for like, because clearly like that, because this is what I love to tell people is, especially the kinds of, oh, I can't do this without God or without the scripture, or without the word. It's like, if you're finding cool things in there to pull out, to me, that means it was already in you.
Yeah.
So what was already in you found it in that expression and made the connection yourself. So kudos to you for that.
Well, thank you. I'll add to what you're saying and say like it's kind of like a potential energy, kinetic energy thing. Like within the story, there was the potential for that insight or whatever, and then have seeing that in it now it becomes kind of a kinetic energy thing, and I don't even know like. If somebody's arguing this is what they really meant, or because this is what they really meant, or what they really wrote, this is how we should be or act or whatever, then I get that conversation. But sometimes like why somebody I don't write poetry so much anymore, but I every now and then I used to. Sometimes every every now and then. I took a class in college. That would
Oh, cool.
yeah, that was actually a cool class. But when you're writing poetry, or when you're writing like some kind of like journal entry or like a public journal entry, maybe on Facebook or whatever, like you're at least me, I'm looking for something that is true to me, encapsulates like what I was thinking or feeling like as best as I can, but also has a meaning that like is beyond what it meant to me. Um, there's like certain phrases, or like in music there's like certain arrangements, or in art there's certain compositions. It's just something that like encapsulates what you wanted to say or get across, but then is so much more than that. And that's the thing that you want to produce. Is a thing that like
Mm.
means something to you, but so much more to you, and has maybe like infinite possibilities for the people who are looking at it or listening to it or reading it. Um, and then in doing that, you hit on something that has a lot of truth in it because it's applicable to so many people. There's that sweet spot, um,
Mm.
and I think so. At that point, like it doesn't matter so much what the artist was trying to get across. And like whenever you hear an artist who's like, "That's not what I was trying to say. What I was trying," and then they get like mad. People are getting like like an alternate good experience out of it. Like, you dickhead. Like,
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends in what direction. In a sense, I guess I can kind of sympathize. Again, that's just kind of how my brain works. Because I know for me, one of the quickest ways to like get me like angry or frustrated is to not just misunderstand what I'm saying, but think that I'm like, but if it was something, or if you're thinking I'm saying like something that's like the opposite of what I'm saying, or if you're trying to credit me with saying something that I actually vehemently disagree with. So, I mean, in that sense, so
or
if
like
some,
or reframing it like in the way they wished you had said it, kind of thing.
yeah, or that too, but yeah, so, but I guess I could understand like if I was like an artist like writing a song, like especially if it's something where I did maybe have a very specific message I was trying to get across. So I guess I wouldn't be
Okay.
so much angry if people interpreted it a different way. I guess I would be just more upset is if I came out like, no, this is what I really meant, but then someone could be like, no, I think you really meant this.
Oh, that's the same kind of thing of like when somebody says what their faith or non-faith belief is, and the other person goes, "No, you're really this." You're like, "No, fucker, I just said I wasn't."
Yeah. Or I guess with the specifically with the music example, so this is a case where this actually happened. So if you're familiar with the Alice Cooper song "School's Out,"
Mhm.
classic, classic song. But like Alice, he's also very famous. I don't know if he's famous for it, but he very often says like rock and roll and politics like should be nowhere near each other. Like none of my songs are political. I'm not about telling people what to think politically whatsoever.
Mhm.
Apparently, like Tom Morello, the guitarist from Rage Against the Machine, disagreed. He's like, "Oh no, School's Out absolutely is a political song." I'm like,
Like he disagreed
okay,
with Alice Cooper.
yeah. He basically said, "No, Alice is wrong. That song is political." I'm like, okay, it's one thing to say, okay, well, I took a political interpretation from it, but to go the
Yeah.
step to say, no, that is a political song.
Yeah,
That's
there
the
have been other things where he has interacted with other people, and he's very much a fundamentalist about what he believes, uh,
Mhm.
and he behaves very similarly in social environments, and
Mhm.
yeah.
And is it just my autism, or does he remind you of Jamal Javanji as well?
Oh yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
They would not get along. No, okay, and from one direction they wouldn't get along. Like Jamal would probably be like very. He would really want to get along with him and just like assume they could and were getting along. But then Morello would be so angry.
And then Jamal would make it sound like him getting angry was actually his fault. But yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get like people. If people don't know who Jamal Javanji is at this point, I'm actually kind of cool with that. I don't want to like enjoy the ignorance, but yeah. So anyway, so I still had a couple other clips I wanted to get to. So are you anything else you wanted to say, or did you want to move on to like transitioning into that particular topic I texted you about earlier today from that one particular video? Because it kind of ties into. At least I had ways to tie it into previous conversations.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the way it kind of what kind of reminded me of this clip in particular is when you were talking about the stuff in the prayer tent, the mash tent, and like I don't remember your specific words, but like if like people believed a thing worked, that kind of like made it work, like that kind of thing. So this next clip is from a talk that Dan Dennett was giving. And like right before this, like so in the clip, you might hear him refer to like Dumbo's feather. So what he's talking about.
Oh, I remember now.
In the story of Dumbo, like
Yeah.
I guess he could actually fly, but like he wasn't real confident, so someone like gave him this feather. He's like, "Oh, this is the magic feather that makes you fly." So as long as he had the feather, he was like super confident that he could fly, even though that wasn't what was actually doing it. So when you hear like Dennett talk about Dumbo's feather, that's what he's talking about. So basically, but this is a point in his talk when he's talking about like the potential harms in religion, because like you could say you could say, well, if someone has their personal faith, if they're not hurting anyone, is it really bothering anything? Is it really harming anything? Because he's, like I said, I guess, the four horsemen or whatever, he seemed to be like take the much less aggressive approach, because he's actually said, and they might have even been in this talk or like other places where he's like, okay, because the big question to ask, and this is why he's wanting to study religion as a phenomenon, is okay, if people just get rid of religion, what are they going to replace it with? And he's like, I don't know what it's going to be replaced with. So therefore, I'm not exactly keen on just getting rid of it cold turkey, because I don't know what's going to happen after that. But he's like, but it is definitely worth it to examine it to see, is it actually helping? Is it doing harm? So he came up with these like 3 ways where it is doing some harm. And I won't play like that whole part of the clip. Like, the full video is like an hour and a half long, but like with the 3 points he's making, I won't play the first 2, but the first one is basically how it can kind of like mask or kind of cover up for atrocities. You can say, well, but these people who like committed these terrible things, well, they're in our religion, so we're going to kind of like cover it up,
No, that's the shit you expose.
Yeah. So, but he says, but these kinds of things can kind of hide under religion. He talks about like, the mafia, like if like mob bosses were also doing things like, building hospitals and running homeless shelters and stuff, it would have been a lot harder to go after them. But that's kind of what we see.
Well, they were usually in, I don't know, not necessarily like the Catholic churches, but like with Catholic society, they were pretty interwoven, and they did like do they did donate money, and so like so they were kind of doing that.
Yeah. So I guess maybe in those cases it didn't make them hard to go after. Then like the second case, he talks about how it makes it really hard for people to like get out of it. Like he talks about like people who are like, professional ministers who kind of realize, oh, I don't think I believe this anymore, but I'm kind of trapped here. This is how I make my living.
Yeah.
So then he gets to this third point that I would like to hear him talk about as soon as my computer decides that it wants to actually do things. Sorry, it's been kind of slow this evening, folks. All right. Here he is. So here Mr. Dan Dennett, once again.
We're trapped. My third reason is that it encourages irrationality. I had a debate in London with
Why'd you stop, Dan?
I
Yeah,
can't remember his
paused.
name now. He's a lord.
He was trying
Lord
to think of his
somebody.
name. That was it.
Well, he defends religion. And the debate was, is religion the greatest threat to a rational scientific worldview? And I took the question seriously. I said, well, if it isn't, what is? Maybe alcohol? Or drugs? Or maybe violent video games? I ran out. I couldn't think of anything else that might be a greater threat. And the reason I think that religion is the greatest of the threats is that it doesn't just disable, it honors the disability.
That right there, when I was watching that earlier today, that fucking hit.
No, dogmatic adherence to an idea, in general, but specifically with religion, when like the fate of everything, like, you know, hangs on that particular dogmatic thing. That's the shit that's going to end the world. Like with AI and nuclear weapons and all that stuff, like, I got too many thoughts that are all similar, and I'm trying to pick them out. But like a dogmatic idea, when you're like, I must do this thing no matter how terrible for the sake of this belief or idea or whatever, because idea or belief is paramount above anything else. Well, that kind of thinking, you can easily destroy everything when everything is less important than the idea or the belief. And it's one of the reasons why I'm kind of hopeful about AI is AI. The danger of AI isn't its existence or it becoming more powerful or more knowledgeable or whatever. It's that not being a global entity. If it gets tribal, or like this country has their AI and this country has their AI, well, now like that AI, if depending on how you train it, it could potentially be the ultimate us versus them tool. Because now you have a super intelligence, a godlike intelligence focused on a single side or a single, like, geared towards a single outcome. Now you've supersized your dedication to an idea, or it's now gone God tier, basically. So like I'm kind of like let's get like God level artificial intelligence going as soon as possible, because if we slow it down and try to silo it into this country has theirs or this company has theirs, it would be best if we created a sentient AI like before we had a chance to harness it, because we can't put our molds on that super intelligence. We're gonna have to merge with AI. Like, it's just that. So, there's a major revival happening in the world, and I think religious people, Christians in particular, are missing it. Like, there's like this explosion. Like, people are like, I just want to know what's real, and like, I don't want a boring job. I want a job that means something to me. And it could be. It doesn't have to be an amazing job where I'm doing important things. It's just like the younger generations are like big into that. They're like, I don't want to go to college if it's for something I don't want to do. Like, feel like there's a giant reshaping of humanity going on, and the people who are hanging on to old ideas and old religions are missing it, and they don't realize they're a threat.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sorry. It was like, I guess your brain like went with that quote like a completely different direction than I was anticipating. So like my brain doesn't know what to do with it. So I'm still
no, I
catching
might
up.
have been going in that direction
Come on.
too.
Yeah.
No, but just having all these different memories of um, like the healing and deliverance stuff, and you start to ask questions, and being in small groups, and you're not allowed to ask certain questions, or you ask certain questions, and you just get kicked back into a circle of thinking, and um, like that's in Christianese terms that's a revival. That's like a new awakening in someone,
Mm.
and you're like stifling it because the dogma says no. Well, the dogma isn't God if you believe in God, you know? Like,
Yeah. Well, but if the dogma came from the spirit, then it's essentially the same thing. So,
but then it's the spirit. Which one is God, the dogma or the spirit?
well, they're both the same because the dogma came from the spirit. Well, I mean, when you don't have an actual God to look at and point to and interact with, you just got to take the best you can get. And the best we can get is dogma. So,
Right. Okay, yeah, the best we can get, but then like stopping anywhere and going, we've arrived, we're here. Like that's kind of like how Joseph Smith, like what stopped in Missouri for 20 years or some shit. Like
mm-hmm.
he's like, going to the promised land, it's way out there. We'll stop here. This is good. Like,
uh,
no, there's still more this way, and they're like, no, this is the best. Like, but you don't. We've only seen this part. Like, it's not best.
yeah. But yeah, so I think that's like what Dennett was getting at when he said, religion doesn't just disable, but it honors the disability. Because like what he was talking about was like how it was kind of like an enemy of like rationalism. He's like, yeah, because like not only does, and this going back to our conversation last week about like faith versus reality or rationality or whatever. He's like, not only does faith go against um, being rational, but it actually kind of wears that almost like a badge of honor in a way, or not just faith, but like religious faith specifically, I guess. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it like honors irrationality and
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or how I like to say it almost seems like, at least in like some of the communities that I've been involved with, like faith is really just a measure of how good are you at denying reality.
yeah.
So if you're able to say, well, I know reality looks like this, but I'm going to believe what God said anyway. And they're like, oh, that's how strong your faith is, that you're able to believe this stuff, even though like literally everything that we're seeing is contrary to it. Like I said, like, no, like when things are contrary to reality, like we have a word for that. It's called wrong. But yeah,
Let me tell you a story. I don't know if
cool.
I don't
Hit
know
me.
if you've heard this one. Gather around, chillins.
Yep. And you who are watching.
All right, so you remember you were there when that giant windstorm / just like wall of water hit the man camp, and it
Mm-hmm.
was
Oh yeah, the only two times I was involved on the MASH team or in the prayer tent, the tent got blown over by a storm both times.
Wait, were you there when we had to sit in the cold near like, the mess area for Mash
Mm-hmm.
and do the thing out there?
Yep.
Huh. All right
And that was
then.
the first year where
Oh
it was
yeah, because that was when you were wandering around talking to people at that time.
yeah, because the first time it was just wind, but then the second time it was wind and rain. So
Like
like people were like
sideways rain. It was
people were
redonkulous.
like almost dying, and
For real.
we were all yeah, because like the first it's just wind. We'll still go around and pray with people and stuff, but like with rain, it's like no, people might die. Everyone just kind of hunker down and do nothing, and
Yeah,
yeah. But
I haven't
anyway,
gotten to the story yet, but
sorry.
the second one when it was windy and cold as shit, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that cold, but like when the wind's blowing at like 60 miles an
It was
hour.
cold. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like at least in the 40s. Like so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was raining so hard. I was wearing rain pants and a rain jacket, and somehow my boots filled up with water. I was like, it just. I was like, there's water running down my leg into my boots, and I'm like blew through my rain suit. All right, so that one, when it was cold, and the medics for the event, I overheard them talking to some of the leadership team, and they're like, "Look, we don't have enough emergency blankets for like all the people that could need them. Like, if people don't have the right gear for this, and their shit's wet, and they try to sleep, and like, we don't have enough stuff to keep them from getting hypothermic." And so that's when they got on the mic and were like, "If you don't have gear, to be safe, like, you can leave, like, no big deal." And there's like a big man up attitude up until then. And
Mhm. Oh yeah.
so apparently one of the guys from the prayer group, and I think I know who it was, and this is why I don't know how to feel about it. When we had to like leave the prayer tent because shit's falling down and stuff, or damn near close to it, uh, everybody was out, and he was kind of like, I think he was slightly under it, and somebody, I didn't see it. The way it was described to me was he was rebuking the storm, shouting at the storm, and telling it to obey God or something, all that kind of stuff, like Old Testament shouting at the heavens kinds of things. And people were like, "Look at his faith," and like after the fact, they're like, "That's amazing. Why didn't we all do that?" And my first response to hearing it, when I was like, why would he be doing that? I know him. Like, he's smarter than that. Like, even if you're shouting now, like, the amount of time it would, like, clouds just don't go poof and disappear. Like, storms just don't go poof and disappear. So, because
Well,
nobody's ever
God,
seen that. So even if this clears up suddenly, like, it's not an instantaneous thing. Like, I didn't get it. And then they're like, "Isn't that great? Like, his faith, and like, why, like that's some strong faith." It's like, oh, I guess. Like,
which I mean, and honestly, the way I see it, and this is going back to like how I can kind of sympathize with the more fundamentalists. And like, yeah, I mean, if you take what the Bible says seriously, like that kind of stuff should work. And you, I
and
mean, you
then
say, yeah, obviously, like naturally, clouds don't do that automatically. But I mean, how many times, like, I mean, Jesus rebuked the storm and it stopped immediately.
so here's the crazy thing. All right, um, here's where I'm like, I don't know what's what anymore. The that storm on the map, because I had my phone because we weren't supposed to, but like I did because I don't know. I want Aaron to be able to get a hold of me. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
I had grabbed it because I knew there's gonna be bad weather, and I was checking the weather, and I was watching the radar, and we got this guy screaming at the heavens, telling the storm to go away, and it was a really bad storm. But where we were, the storm parted, went around us, and then came back together again on the radar. And I was like, "Well, this isn't helping anything." Like,
Well, apparently it didn't part enough
like
because
people,
we
I
still
know,
got pretty
yeah,
fucked up.
but like the worst of it went around us, even though it just flattened like a bunch of tents, just pancaked them.
Well, it might have also had to do with the fact that we were up on top of this giant hill where, air kind of tends to move. Yeah.
Yeah, but we were also, we were on a high point and a low point river right next to us, and then it does kind of like level out again. So kind of geographically, it makes sense for
Mhm.
like weather to kind of move around the high point a little bit.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking, well, was it the prayers of that guy, or was it because we were protected because God, blah 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 blah? I'm like, how do I know God didn't send the storm? Like, maybe God was upset at what was being taught or said there.
I just want to point out, I loved how you mixed God in with the blah blah blah. It was like God blah blah.
God, blah blah.
I don't know if he meant to do that or not, but that
No.
was fantastic, and I enjoyed it.
God, blah blah. That was a sticking point for a little bit where I was like, I don't know how to feel about that. Like, is it good to scream it? Is it good to scream at this guy?
It's like, should we all be doing that like all the time? Like, but then no one would ever get any rain, and then all the corn would die. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so was there anything else you had to say on that? Because
Nope.
okay, because my brain is wanting me to go places. So back to Dan Dennett's quote about religion not just disabling but honoring the disability. So I think what he was talking about was like specifically when it comes to like rationality and how as we say faith is almost like I said, it's a measure of like your strong faith with how willing to go against the rational or reality or what's apparent reality is
That
like
feels so gross now.
strength. I know, right?
Ugh.
But where my mind went with that quote about like religion honoring the disability, it was just my mind went to the whole idea of like our brokenness and how we're like totally like less than, and like God's up here, we're down here, like not even on the same
Oh yeah.
thing.
No, my
So
brain didn't go there, but I'm glad you said that because that is yes.
because if you want to talk about ways that like religion is harmful, like even
The
the
broken
most
slave
benign
mentality.
or like friendly versions, like there's still like this
No, that's so toxic.
this notion of where like he said, like, so the way he puts it, it's not just noticing that we're like broken, or like he uses disability. I don't know if that's a PC term anymore, or how like acceptable that is.
Yeah,
Like,
it
oh,
depends who you are.
so, yeah,
You
so
know,
I'll go with the Christianese brokenness, even though I know that like that can probably be pretty triggering for some people as well, which I get. But yeah, so it's not just saying we're broken, but it's almost like I think like Paul even says like I glory in whatever his words for it was, because in my weakness, because I know like in my weakness God is shown to be strong, and like
all right, no, okay, but I think having that mindset is very, very close to a healthy place. Like
it's like so close. Mm-hmm.
feeling strong in your weakness is much better than feeling weak in your weakness. To feel like weak in your brokenness,
Oh
to
yeah,
start to
but
get strength from it, I that's a much shorter walk to rejecting brokenness.
yeah,
Does
but
that
I
make any
think
sense?
yeah, but like you said, it's close to healthy, but I think the problem is because yes, the idea of that like you can be strong in times when you feel weak. Like yes, that's a healthy attitude, but the religious attitude is you are weak, but in your weak, like you don't just feel weak, you are weak. Like you are weakness, but in that it's God that's strong, not you, but it's
Yeah,
God that's strong. So that's where like it's so close, and which is why like a lot of
it's like
people,
an
because I like
inoculation to the truth.
yeah, because this is what I mean. Because I have conversations with people who like they say they've been deconstructing or whatever, but like, but I just can't let go of like the God concept, because like I feel like they'll say things like, I just feel like I just been through so much shit, and these people like totally have, and I get it, but they're like, I just feel like I can't let go of God because I feel like I just can't make it through this without him. But I'm like, okay, but let me just put it to you this way: if there is no God, then that means you did make it through that without him, and you are making it through all this bullshit without him.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So that's that puts into words something that Aaron, my wife, and I have noticed, that since walking away from, or moving away, we didn't walk away from, that makes it sound like a choice. It just kind of happened. Like moving away from,
Yeah, you were relocated.
yeah, I was traded. uh, like the burden of the weakness and brokenness, and that's when we started getting better. Was when, like, yeah, we realized that, and it was a Christian counselor who made this obvious to us, is that like things could be a like just a terrific wreck. Like, because everybody in our family is neurodivergent. Like Aaron and I, like our uh, ways of dealing with stress is what makes the other person's stress worse. and
Yeah.
and I'm like, I was seeing the therapist for like our marriage, and just like personally, this is when you were going through cancer, and my dad was super sick, and like
Yeah.
Aaron and I were having problems, and we're all neurodivergent, and like we can't do shit for shit, and uh, and then the counselor's like, "Do you realize how well you guys are doing?" And because she's like, everything's kind of a mess. and you and this is only how bad you guys are. Like
Mm.
like you could be doing worse. Like you could be making other choices, but you're not. In fact, you'll even see those as like choices you could make. And uh yeah, just so interesting that like therapists, like even like any good therapist, um this is when it gets weird for them being Christians also. There's so much stuff about what makes somebody a healthy person psychologically, and then also physically, basically because of that, it has an impact. It's contrary to Christian thinking or the Bible, or
Yeah.
like you have to disagree with parts of the Bible in order to like get somebody to a healthier place. Like I know of marriages. I know of one in particular I'm thinking of right now. I'm not going to say names because that wouldn't be fair at all. Like their marriage was actively harmed by the dude trying to do the patriarchy thing, and like everything was his responsibility. And then, like if she's struggling like with mental health, then like that's, he did something wrong. Maybe not it's all his fault, but like he definitely helped it go bad. And uh, it, and then her focus on just always trying to do the God thing, and where's God leading me? And
Yeah.
I'm like, now looking back, I'm like, God, this is a figure of speech. God, I hope they're not uh, as into that stuff as they were, because
Yeah.
I think it's going to end their marriage. And
Mm.
um, just don't trying to like square peg round hole it all the whole way through, and just uh, white knuckle Bible it all the way through. And
Yeah. Yeah, man.
no, it's bad news. That's the
Yeah.
thing that really bothers me the most, is when we're like, no, there's proof. There's proof that looking at it this way, or like telling gay people they're doing evil things, or
Yeah.
or telling trans people, no, you're really the gender you were labeled at birth, and
Yeah.
and
Or
it,
telling children that they're like gross and evil and deserve hell.
like there's
Yeah.
we have proven those are bad things. It hurts people, and like for somebody to go, no, like you just got to have faith. This is what's best. It's like, well, your faith is hurting someone else. Like your faith and your
Yeah.
like application out loud of it might help that person have reasons to commit suicide. Bad
Yeah.
reasons to
And
get like,
speaking of like faith and science, like we can prove that scientifically.
And like, no,
that
you're holding on to your faith.
doing
Like,
harm
no,
to people.
this isn't just your faith. And what, like,
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
is something that hurts other people. Fine if you want to hold on to it and it only hurts you. Like, I still feel bad for you. But when you're, ugh.
Yeah, because this is why, because like a lot of atheists will say like the reason they're so outspoken against religion is because of its influence in specifically like the public square, like politics. Like say, I don't want politicians like enforcing their religion on everyone, and like, but like so like if you believe it, fine. But like practice it in your own homes and your own churches, it's like keep it to yourself. But I'm like, I'm not even fine with that, you know, because of all the bullshit, like the things we've been talking about here, like I'm not fine with people just keeping it within their own homes and within their own churches, like telling each other you're dirty, you're broken, you deserve to be tortured for eternity, or like this man needs to be in control of you, woman, because you're a woman and he's a man. like I'm not fine with that on any level, like public square or not.
No. Mindshift had, Brandon on Mindshift had a thing recently about the slave mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that really was a heavy hitter. I like had to pause it because you know how he's a
Yeah.
great speaker and he just goes for it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're like, hey, ah! There's so much.
Yeah, like he's one of those channels. Like I'll literally like watch him talk about anything. Like I'll even like see the topic for the video, and I'll be like, I'll watch the video because I love the guy and I love his channel. But I don't know if this is a topic I'm really going to be into. But like invariably, like no matter what he talks about, like
Yeah.
it always fucking hits every time. Yeah,
And he's speaking off the cuff, and it's crazy organized. He has like the spiritual gift of
yeah.
he speaks in paragraphs and like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, no, it's good stuff. Yeah, and and it hits. No, he has the talent for it.
But yeah, so let's just to kind of wrap up the thoughts on religion, you know, encouraging like the disability or the brokenness or whatever. It's like because speaking of my situation, 'cause that's one of the things like because I got it from like all angles. Like when I was going through like having cancer and then like recovering, like it's still weird to me like people telling me that like I was so inspirational and how brave I was because again like I've said multiple times like I was just doing everything I knew how to do. Like I wasn't like consciously trying to be brave or trying to
Yeah,
anything. Basically, I was just like, all right, I'll just keep going to the doctors and not die for as long as I can. That was kind of my mentality. But
that's kind of what veterans say too. Is
yeah,
people are like, "Thank you for your service" or whatever, and if they
like
saw
I was,
combat, they're kind of like, "Thanks, but like I didn't do it for you."
yeah,
uh,
the dude
or
next to
like,
me. Yeah,
and then like, there's that line from I don't remember the exact line, but it's from Black Hawk Down where there's the guy is newer in the service and he's talking about the politics of it, and he asks this Delta Force guy, Special Forces, and he says, what do you think about all this? Because they're in Somalia and shit, which was like a political mess, and he's like, you know what I think? It doesn't matter what I think. He says it's something like when the bullets start flying, he goes, all that politics shit goes right out the window, and it's basically all about surviving it, and it's about the
mm-hmm.
bond you have with the person you're fighting next to, or
Right.
and um, I think that's what it's like to be human. Like if you're
Mm.
still stuck on
It's a good word.
politics, the religion of it all, then uh, I don't know. It's kind of like you're still in fantasy land. You're not really in it because the reality is we're all in the same boat. Like we are all like we are what happens when physics is us. Like that's
Pretty much.
that's all anything is. And like we
Yeah.
don't know what anything looks like. We just know what it looks like when light bounces off of it. Like,
Exactly.
and that's only part
We
of
know
what's
what
bouncing
the
off
light
of it.
looks like. Yeah. Yeah, we can only see like even such a small band of light spectrum. Yeah.
And then seeing anything like even a color like red, the experience of red is different for every person. Because it's like their memories and their brain makeup. We don't even know if red looks the same to everyone. Like red,
Yeah.
because we just have a shared name for it.
Yeah. Does this look red to everybody else?
Yes.
Yeah.
But how do we know what red looks like to you? We just have the same name for it.
Yeah.
Like, how do we
Yeah.
know red doesn't look like purple to other people? I mean, because of physics. But I mean, like,
That's beside the point. But it is the point. But yeah. So yeah, so yeah, so when I was hearing that from people, like the whole like, oh, you're so brave, like, so what I guess particularly appreciated, and going back to like, what I like to tell people who feel like, well, I can't let go of the concept of God because I feel like I can't do it without God, but I'm like, but you are, like, from my point of view, you are doing it without God, like, so that's I guess maybe what impacted me the most is like, because I kind of had a feeling that, like, coming out of like having cancer and then going into remission and then that leading to me becoming an atheist, because like with a lot of people it's usually like the opposite. They're like, okay, if cancer, it's usually if having cancer made you an atheist, it's because it was like really bad and you're like, this sucks, there is no God. Like that was never like
but
my
that's
angle.
just grief that got stuck, though. That's just grief in
Yeah.
the anger phase
Which,
that
and
got
again,
stuck.
going back to like, people say, well, that's such a terrible reason to like stop believing in God. I'm like, it's really not when you think about it, but beside the point. But then for me, it's like usually, if anything, like, because my healing or whatever you want to call it, it was pretty sudden and like seemed almost like kind of out of nowhere. So yeah, it would have been, I I guess the way that story usually, or I'm sure the way a lot of the people in my life were expecting that story to go was, oh, this is going to strengthen my faith and like make me an even stronger Christian. But I was like, no, for various reasons, it ended up kind of pushing me away. So that's what really means a lot, is like the reaction, like, because I knew like that story of like, oh, seemingly miraculously recovering from cancer turned me into an atheist. And I know like, oh, people are going to think that's weird. But what really impacted me is like the response I've been getting from the, like, whether atheist or just otherwise non-believer, non-religious um, group of people I've gotten to know and become friends with. Like, and that's the thing they've been telling me, is like they just find it so impressive that I've been able to like make it through this stuff and like basically, the way they would, like, sometimes they've put it is like kind of keep my, I guess for lack of a better term, like, the Christians would say like keep the faith, but like, but keep the faith in lack of faith, if that makes sense.
No,
I don't
yeah.
know the exact way they put it, but like how they said, like, how I remained like staunchly atheist through the whole thing. It's like, well, yes and no. It's really, I don't know if I was atheist through the whole thing, but it's kind of what pushed me towards it. But whatever. But yeah, but that's what I guess to me it just meant a lot. Like I said, because like as much as I love to tell other people that as an encouragement, like, no, you are doing this without God. Like, just like also reminding myself to like turn that back on myself, and like, because one, being okay with telling myself that I'm awesome, because that's fine, and not something I've been used to for most of my life, or at least not used to being okay with for most of my life. But yeah, just realizing like, and on top of like anyone who knows me personally, like knows like the last like 4 years of my life have just been like absolute hell, just like after another. Like the fact like I'm still here, like I'm still making it, and I'm not relying on faith. I'm not relying on God, but not saying I'm not relying on anything. But what I'm relying on is things that I can tell are real. The people in my life, friends, like Matt
No,
here. Yeah. Or
And do you think it makes it more real now? Also, that kind of
makes what
stuff.
more.
It makes the friends and the relationships and yourself, like, it makes all of that more
Oh yeah,
real. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Because and but yeah, because after a life of, I guess, I mean, we call it humility, but it's self-deprecation. It's, I mean, there are worse terms than that that I can't think of at the moment. But yeah, just realizing like, no, like I'm still here. I'm still making it through. Like I said, with help, obviously, with people like you, Matt, and like other friends and family who like stuck with me through everything. I can't thank all of you enough, by the way. But yeah, and just realizing, yeah, just that aspect of being able to encourage other people with something and then also being able to encourage myself with it is like really cool to be able to do.
Yeah.
So
I kind of feel like all the stuff that it kind of sounds like, so like when you were talking, uh tell me if like this is kind of something that you're going through too. Like, the stuff that I was looking for in Christianity and with the healing and deliverance stuff, I feel like where I was like chasing after that before, and I felt like I was getting closer, and I might have been. Uh, that's all coming much more easily now. I,
hmm.
I call it the roots of the spirit, or just like
Yeah.
the feeling the like. I would have called it the presence of God before, but now it's more like the presence of contentment and like knowing that I'm always there
Hmm.
and that like I am not a danger to myself. In the way that like the slave mentality and the brokenness would have had
Yeah.
me to believe. Because like I survived this long, and like you survived this long, and guess who was there the whole time? Me. You. So like clearly we're not broken to the point that like death, spiritual death and real death is the only result. uh no, I feel like I have more of what I have what I was chasing after, and so that's why I think like this process of like going as deep as you can in your faith if you have it, and then coming out on the other side,
Yeah.
or like going through the door at the end of that tunnel and then being
Hmm.
on the other side of that, like that is the next like big awakening or revival or whatever, except it's not the religious language anymore.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
um
Yeah. Yeah, because I would say, yeah, definitely what I'm experiencing now is it's maybe not what I would have thought I was actually after, but it's really what I was after. Because like what I was after was the spiritual experience. I was after,
yeah, yeah,
the feeling of the presence of God. But that's only because I thought that was what was real, but I was missing that in so much of my life before that. But now I'm realizing, oh, that's not real. So now I feel like I actually, not that I'm claiming to have fully grasped, the breadth of reality, like by any stretch, but I feel like where I'm at now is so much more of a real place than anywhere I've been in my
yeah,
entire life before. So it may not be the like specific things that I was like chasing after, but like at its core, like the fundamental thing I was after, which was I want to be experiencing what is reality, what is real. And
yeah.
that's, yeah.
And it doesn't have the wow or the woo woo factor like as some of like the prayer results did. um
Hmm.
but I but it's more real, it's more lasting. it's not like a fleeting thing. Like the woo and the wow was a fleeting thing, and it was people often had relapses after the experience, and they're like, "Oh, my faith, why didn't I?" Blah, and all that. And
I need to blah more often.
but I think my last time serving on mesh, I realized that I wasn't trying to push anybody through anything, and just kind of like helping them go where they were going, and being comfortable with that. And I was fortunate that like be paired up with this other prayer guy, and he was very much a go with the flow kind of character, except when he got weird. He loved people and was kind of touchy feely, and like sometimes like that was more than people could handle. You know, he wasn't able to tailor it to his audience every time. Wasn't able to dial himself back in a way that wasn't overbearing. But we were talking to this guy, and I realized that he had kind of like this burden just like shift, and he was free of something, I think with his dad or whatever. And it felt more lasting and more permanent than other things I had been a part of, where people were like this looked more like freedom than a dodge or a parry or something. You know, like it wasn't a sidestep for now kind of thing. This was like, oh, he's in a new place, and it was calm and peaceful. And the other guy kind of like walked him through basically, which was like some kind of like peer counseling thing, really, and like walked him through a memory of his dad and like just an alternate way of looking at it. Looking at like more of what was going on then, instead of just how the trauma remembers it. And I was like, that was so calm and peaceful and not flashy, and looked like a conversation. And that was kind of a big deal. And now I would say, yeah, like being in that good place, that good spot, doesn't look flashy at all. Doesn't look sexy. It just looks healthy.
Maybe sometimes it looks sexy. Depends on what mood I'm in.
No, that could be.
Sometimes I just can't help it.
It's just sometimes I can't help it. I just move a certain way and ladies swoon.
or at least I would like to think. But
well, that's the placebo effect, right? If you just consider yourself like,
so if anyone out there feels like they're swooning, please let me know.
All right, did you see Fight Club?
I saw like the last half of it.
Okay, you gotta watch the whole thing. But in that story, the Tyler Durden character is what's his nuts actual main character, alter ego and shit. And and then you reflect back on it. They even show a few clips, like when he's in the like the perfume at the perfume counter or something, and he's or selling soap at the beauty counter, and you realize like, oh, he's just that regular nerdy guy, but because he is convinced he is basically Brad Pitt, with like weirdly ripped abs. Like, how do you have like a ripped pelvic area? That was weird. Apparently the ladies love that because that's like the sex muscle or something. I don't know. That's just what what the ladies said in response to. But so no, but that's a real thing. Like, if you see yourself a particular way, then other people kind of feel compelled to see you that way too. Like Donald Trump, he's an old man. He's like an orange with the comb over, and and if he wasn't as bombastic and as convinced that he is as awesome as he thinks he is, then like you. All right, who's not Rand Paul? Who was his dad?
Ron Paul.
Ron Paul, right? If he had the size and the voice and the demeanor of Ron Paul, like he wouldn't have nearly the following. It's the bombastic confidence and all that. Like people are like, "Yeah, let's get behind this guy. He knows what's up." And but if he was like, I actually do have a lot of money, and but that's not like if that's how he was.
Yeah.
People don't follow that guy through a Capitol building window.
Or they didn't actually follow him through the window. They just followed his suggestion through the. He wasn't going anywhere. But yeah. But anyway.
No, he tried to. He choked his Secret Service detail driver because the guy refused to take him to the rally because that's not safe at all. So he grabbed his neck to try to get him to change direction. That was actual testimony in front of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's the fundamentalist leader guy.
Yeah.
I don't know, choking people for Jesus.
I don't know. I'd kind of not like to talk about him right now. But,
me too.
All right. So,
why'd I say it?
I did have one last Dan Dennett clip to show, unless there was anything else you wanted to say, like wrapping up any other tangents or.
No, kind of exhausted all those tangents.
Cool. All right. So this last clip I wanted to show is where he's talking about. So this is a very recent interview he was doing with Richard Dawkins, talking about a certain like health scare that he had. I don't know exactly when it happened, and what I love is he talks about the idea of thanking goodness. And I think that maybe like kind of a good way to kind of wrap up our discussion here. So without much further ado, or at least as much ado as it takes for my computer to decide that it actually wants to do things with the stuff for the people, with the people, here's Dan talking about thanking goodness. Take us out, Dan.
I had an aortic dissection, which is usually fatal and within a few minutes. But my aorta was all wrapped with like duct tape. It was scar tissue from an earlier heart operation. And so my life was saved. And as I recovered in the hospital, various people wondered if I'd perhaps had any epiphanies, if I'd thought,
Yes.
had I perhaps found God at that moment? I said, yeah, I had an epiphany, but not the one they wanted. But my epiphany
I can
was
relate.
that when I say thank goodness, that's not a euphemism for thank God. I really mean it. Thank goodness. A lot of goodness in the world. And eliminate the middleman. Thank the ones that have brought the goodness on.
So good.
Yeah.
Because that was my, I guess, mantra or whatever, if you want to say, like, after going into remission from cancer, like I said, I can kind of relate to, like, yes, I had a bit of an epiphany, but again, I feel like not the kind a lot of people maybe expected or wanted me to have. But yeah, the way I like expressed my thankfulness is like I'm thanking like all the doctors and nurses and like everyone at Christ Hospital here in Cincinnati, which is an amazing hospital, which I recommend. Like, hopefully you don't need to go to a hospital because you have cancer, but if you do have cancer and are anywhere near the Cincinnati area, Christ Hospital, ironically enough, absolutely amazing. Cannot speak highly enough. Like, literally saved my life. Like, and also like with the Cincinnati Cancer Advisors, which is another group that's here in town. Like, yeah, that's like with all the advancements that have been done in medical science, like because people care about cancer and trying to cure it. So that's why I always say like medical science is my personal savior. along with all the people behind it. So if you're ever on the fence about it, donate to cancer research. The life you save may have been my own or your own, or so.
I think that's a big deal that we pay attention to the actual like the individual saviors in our lives. Like there's like people save us in a particular moment, or like there's a I don't know, like the littlest things people say were like that kind of made that moment for you, and well, it's like a little mini salvation in that moment. Like paying attention to like the actual things that are saving for us in daily things, and instead of attributing it to God or to Jesus, like taking stock and appreciation of the person that was involved in that saving moment, and then realizing that it's not just like the religiously framed saving moments, that it's seeing like a wild animal adopted to save its life in a YouTube channel or video or something, and you're like, oh, that's deep. I don't even like I don't really get what's happening here, but something's happening here, and it's just good. And it means something to you and brightens your day, and you're like, now I want to be nicer to people because that person was nice to an animal. Like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I was just kind of half listening, also like half distracted because apparently like someone's watching on YouTube and it's decided to actually just absolutely go off in all the comments here, and I'm not going to bother showing the majority of these, but I did just want to point out. Just want to see where'd it go. He keeps typing, and so yeah, he's apparently trying. I don't know if he's trying to save the two of us. He can clearly tell there's something wrong with the two of us. So, but he's wanting to let us
Oh
know.
wow! I didn't
Yeah,
see that
but he
popping
wants
up.
that is the Holy Spirit of Jess. So,
My cousin's wife's name is Jess, and she's a little
oh,
spiritual.
well then,
I
that's
should,
apparently we
I
need to
should,
be following her Holy Spirit, and so
right? Was
thank
she
you,
on?
Wesley Curry, for pointing us in the direction of Jess. I will take that to heart. Thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate that. I am now
So
a
so
complete believer in the
Wesley
name of Jess.
Curry. What if you're wrong? I mean, you're really sure that you're right and that the way you're seeing things is right. But what if you're wrong? You could be. There's no way you're right about everything. I mean, even if you're right about most things. So what are you wrong about?
Mm-hmm.
That's important to know. Like this version of God that you're trying to tell us about, like, what if that's a false God? Like, what if that is not the real God? And there's more to know about that God. Like you're saying that like you know everything there is to know about this God, and here's the answers, and here's where me and Tommy are wrong. But like if you don't have all of what God is, then you only have a portion of it. That's a false God. That's not an omni God. That's a partial God that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not too interested in entertaining much of this guy's ridiculousness thing. You're kind of ruining the mood here, but yeah. So yeah, I just want to get back to that clip about Dennett and like talking about like thanking goodness, and because he's talks in other places. I think he actually wrote like a full like essay or article about thanking goodness. So I encourage people to go and look that up. Um, but yeah, because he says like not only is it like appropriately like focusing your gratitude, but he said, but then that also inspires you to add more of your own goodness to the world. So like to create something that other people would be thankful for. So I think that's so among so many other things that I think will be like a legacy of Dan's, like to me, that's going to be like a huge takeaway that I have from the things that he talked about and taught and expressed. So
Yeah, he had a big piece with with himself and with reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right. Well, Matt, did you have any other closing thoughts, parting words, and thoughts on Dan or any other stuff we talked about this evening? Or...
Um, I really think that something big is happening in human consciousness or evolution or whatever faith stuff. Like embracing the omni everything of God. Uh, so like if God is omni everything, then the only place to go is keep chasing the everything. And if you're a believer and you're like you just know God is bigger than everything. Like bigger love, bigger knowing, bigger power, and any kind of like solid story we try to put around that and say this is what it is, and anybody who says differently is wrong and evil. And okay, now that conviction is a source of evil because not asking the question like, "Am I wrong about this? Is this belief wrong, or is this assumption wrong?" That's where every atrocity starts. Like every genocide in history was because enough people were convinced that this one thing or this one way of seeing things or this one people group was good, everything else was bad. And it's that firm conviction, that like dogmatic conviction, whether it was a faith thing or secular, like Mao in China, like when this thing cannot be wrong, then anything done in support of that is good, no matter how awful it is.
Yeah.
Like getting excited that like people are going to be tortured in hell, or praising that as justice or whatever. That's a horrible thing. In any other context, like praising people being tortured or getting like all like that's just, I don't know. That's just antithetical to being human. Because no, like the human race can't survive that. Like if that's how we live, like then we just all die eventually. Uh, I don't know. It's so broken. There's a turning point that has to happen right now, and if we don't make the turning point, I think it's the end of the world. I think we have to get to the openness of everything and like realizing we don't know shit about shit, and that humility that comes with that. If we don't have that, it's the end of the world. Somebody from some side is going to kill everyone else, and then eventually themselves. Like, so if God is omni everything, then um, embracing that is what saves us. So why be afraid of God being bigger than your category, bigger than your faith, bigger than your religion? And then God becomes so expansive, God doesn't exist. Or God is everything. But it's kind of a wash.
Man.
But anything short of facing that is, it's a made up God. I don't know. Like why not want to know what's real for sure, instead of stopping somewhere along the way and saying I know, but there's this other information. God could be bigger. Like why settle for Why settle for a smaller God? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, like that all was probably good, but like my brain was already in let's wrap up mode, so I was not prepared for you to go that deep.
Me neither. Just kind of came out.
But I'm sure it was good, but my brain was just like, what?
No, I hear you.
So I'll watch back later and be blown away or inspired or whatever I was supposed to be with that. So
yeah, I will say before we bend some dicks or benediction, any engagement is good engagement
yes.
for the algorithm.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. So
we appreciate all y'all's.
Yeah. So thank you for your support and your comments.
And apparently your enthusiasm, like
yeah,
you got to bring it back to like I'm sure you just like my namesake, the Apostle Saint Thomas, all about fingering Jesus's holes, man. So apparently
yeah.
you fingered them good and hard. So yeah, you
Super
believe in those
convinced.
holes. Those holes have pleased you very much. I see you're very convinced. So keep keep on the straight and hard and narrow or whatever that is. And
Yeah. Yeah, what's it called? The Cedars of Lebanon? Like, oh.
Anyway, all right. Well, speaking of dicks to Ben, you're gonna.
Well, yes. Thanks to everyone who's watched and commented. We appreciate your support, and thank you for telling the algorithm that this is a video worth watching with your engagement. That is amazing, and couldn't thank you enough. And may your things and stuff be forever with your people.
Yes, and I guess in the words of Dan Dennett, thank goodness for Dan Dennett.
Yeah,
I'll miss you, buddy. All right, to Dan. If you have anything left in your glass, folks,
I got some whiskey in mine.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we will see you back here next week. Good night, folks.
Good night.